This video covers review 11, problems 14 through the end. So, problem 14, they've asked us to find the expression that represents x squared minus 25 in factored form. So I notice here that there are only two terms, so I'm going to look to see if this is a difference of squares. I can take the square root of the first term and of the last term, and it does have a minus sign, so this is a difference of squares, and the formula on my formula chart tells me to rewrite them with just the square rooted version of those terms, make one positive and make one negative. Problem 15, I have three terms, so this is not a difference of squares. However, I do notice that you can take the square root of the first term and the square root of the second term, and if you multiply 2 times both of those, you would get back to the middle term. So this is a perfect square trinomial, meaning that I have my square root of the first term, square root of the last term, and I follow the sign of the middle term, and that would be squared. If you don't see that or you don't catch it, you could use the box and you would get your terms are x minus 1 and x minus 1. So you might just want to make sure you recognize that this is written the same way. Problem 16, factors of this. Well, first I notice that I have 2, 6, and 36. Those look like they might have a GCF. So I'm going to go math number 9, math number 9, not 0. Math number 9, and check between 2 and 6, close parentheses, comma, and 36. Remember, you cannot put signs in that, but I can take out a GCF of a 2 as well as an x. The x is because x is listed in every term. So when I take out that GCF of 2x, I'm left with x squared plus 3x minus 18 because my x's cancel here. Now from this, I can't take the square root of 18 and, it doesn't work nicely. So this is where I'm going to use my GPS. So my g was 2x. My product is negative 18x squared, and my sum is 3x in the middle. So I'm going to put my product divided by x into the calculator. So negative 18 divided by x goes in the calculator. Second table, and I'm looking for a row that will add to a positive 3. 1 plus negative 18 is negative 17. This is negative 7. Ooh, that's a negative 3, but I need a positive. I skip these because they are decimals. 6 minus 3 would get me to 3. Because this first term is an x squared, I can use my tool of just writing my factors and not using the box, because if I put them in the box, they will put out the same factors. That only works when you have an x squared as a leading term. However, if you use the box, you would get the same thing as I did. 17, I see two terms. I'm also looking at the fact that there might be a GCF. So math number 9 between 5 and 180. Because I only have two terms, I only need to do GCF once, and I'm going to take out that 5. So when I do, 5 divided by 5 cancels. 180 divided by 5 gives me 36. Now this only has two terms, so I'm looking to see if it's a difference of squares. However, there is a plus sign, so this is not a difference of squares. And anytime we have two terms, that's an x squared plus a number, you cannot factor that further. So you could write out GPS, but you won't get anywhere, and that is all you can do on that problem. Problem 18, I have three terms, so it's not a difference of squares. If I try to take the square root of 35, it doesn't work, so I need to use my GPS. There is no GCF in this one because we have the plain x squared term. My product is first times last. My sum is in the center, so I will put the product divided by x into my calculator. So negative 35 divided by x. And I'm going to search in the table for the sum. So I click second table, and I'm looking for two numbers that add to negative 2. So 1 minus 35 is negative 34, decimal, decimal, decimal. 5 minus 7 would give me negative 2. And again, in this problem, because my leading term is just an x, I can just go straight to my answer without using the box. Feel free to use the box, but the box will tell you the exact same answer, so that's why we can kind of skip over the box for that one. This one I see two terms, x squared and a negative 144, so I'm going to see if it's difference of squares. It does have two terms. It does have a minus sign, so I need to check and see if I can take the square root of both terms. So the first term is an x squared. The square root of x squared is x. The square root of 144 is 12, so I can take the square root. So I follow my difference of squares formula, where 1 is negative and 1 is positive. Remember, the order matters, so because x squared came first, the square root of x squared goes in my answer first, and then the square root of 144 will go after the signs. Problem 20, I see two terms, so I'm going to check for difference of squares. It does have two terms. It does have a minus sign, so last thing I need to check is if I can take the square root of both terms. So the square root of x squared is x. In my calculator, the square root of 256 is 16. So this is a difference of squares. I follow the formula on my formula chart, which is a minus and a plus, and the square roots go in the same order that they were originally listed in. Problem 21, I see two terms, so I'm checking for a difference of squares. There are two terms. There is a minus sign, so I'm going to see if I can take the square root of both terms. And this one we just have to be a little more careful because there's numbers and letters in both. So when I take the square root of 81, I get 9. The square root of a squared is a. The square root of 144 is 12. And the square root of b squared is b. And I follow my formula, so the square root of a will go first. The square root of b will go second. And the formula tells me to make one positive, make one negative. So again, I'm just following my formula chart under difference of squares, and I take the square root of both and put them in the same order they started in. Problem 22, I see three terms, so this is not a difference of squares. However, I do notice that that last term and the first term can take the square root, so I'm going to check for a perfect square trinomial. So when I take the square root of x squared, I get x. The square root of 100 is 10. And if I do 2 times 10 times x, I get back to 20x, which is my middle term. So perfect square trinomial on my formula chart tells me the square root of the first term goes first, square root of the last term goes in the back, and I follow the sign of the middle term to figure out that it's x minus 10 squared. Again, if you don't see that shortcut or that trick, you could go back to the box and you would get the same thing. Just remember, you would get x minus 10, and that's the same thing. Problem 23, I see that maybe there's a GCF, so let me check. Math number 9. So I have 3 and 30, and also 75. Oh good, there's a GCF of 3. So let me take out that 3 first. And when I take it out, remember I divide, so 3 divided by 3 is 1. 30 divided by 3 is 10. 75 divided by 3 is 25. And then I do notice that the first term and the last term can take the square root. So the square root of x squared is x. Square root of 25 is 5. And then that middle term, if I do 2 times 5 times x, I get 10x, which is the middle term. So this is a perfect square. So GCF goes in front, square root of the first term, square root of the last term, sine of the middle term, squared. Problem 24, I'm looking at 2x, 11, and 15. 11 and 2 are both prime numbers, and 2 can't go into 11. But if you weren't sure, math number 9, I'm looking at 2 and 11 and 15. And my GCF is a 1. So I need to use my GPS. I can't take the square root of 15 or 2, so this is not a perfect square, and it has more than 2 terms, so it's not a difference of squares. So I've already looked at a GCF, and there isn't one. So first and last term gives me 30x squared, and then my center sum is 11. So in y equals, I'm going to put the product, and because this is not a special case, I will need my box. So 2x squared and 15. Also notice that I do have a number in front of x squared, so I will definitely need to use the box. So I have 30 divided by x. So I'm going to go to my table and search for the sum of 11. So 1 plus 30 is 31, 2 plus 15 is 17, 3 plus 10 is 13, decimal, 5 plus 6 is 11. So I have 5 and 6. And then to finish out the box, I'm going to take out my GCFs. So 2x squared and 6x. If you're not sure about the numbers, you can do math number 9 between 2 and 6. My GCF is a 2, and they both share an x. 5x and 15, again, if you're not sure, math number 9, 5 and 15 share a 5, but not an x. 2x squared and 5x, 2 and 5 share a 1 and an x. 6x and 15 share a 3. If you do a quick check, 1x times 2x is 2x squared, 3 times 5 is 15. So my answer is 2x plus 5 and x plus 3. Remember, the order in which you write your factors does not matter as long as 2x and 5 stay in a parentheses together and x and 3 stay in a parentheses together. 25, I'm going to double check for a GCF, so math number 9. I need to do it twice. Math number 9. I'm looking between 10 and 29 and also 21. And there is no GCF. I can't take the square root of 10 or 21, so I need to use the box because it's not a special case. First square and last square are first and last terms. They multiply for my product of negative 210 x squared, and then my sum is 29x. So in y equals, I will put the product sign and all into y equals. So negative 210 divided by x, and I go to the table to look for 29. So these are all too big, decimal, too big. Oh, well, that gives me a negative 29. So what if I flip it? What if I say 35 minus 6? That would give me 29. So 35 and minus 6. And again, from here you take out your GCFs. If you need the calculator, it is there for you. So these share 2x. These share a 7. These share a 5 and an x. These share a negative 3. If I do a quick check, 5x times 2x is 10x. Negative 3 times 7 is negative 21. So 2x plus 7 and 5x minus 3 are my terms, or my factors. 26, I notice that all of these have an x. I check and there's nothing else other than an x. So I take an x out and I'm left with 3x squared minus 21x plus 10. This does not have an x squared as the leading term, so I have to use the box and multiply those two for my product. My sum is a negative 20x. So I'm going to put my product of 30 divided by x and search for my sum of negative 21. So when I'm looking, 31, 17, 13, 11, 11, I'm not finding it there. Let me check up in the negatives because I need a negative 21. But as I'm searching, I'm not really finding any factors. So I'm going to double check that I divided everything correctly and that I took out the correct GCF and make sure I don't have any other issues. But I don't see anything, so this one cannot be factored further, and you don't need the box because there's nothing else you can take out. Problem 27, I'm looking at these and I'm not seeing a GCF, so there is no GCF, so my product is first times last, so 36x squared. My sum is 33x, so I'm going to put my product of 36 and search for my sum of 33. However, 1 plus 36 is 37, then we hop down to 20, 15, 13, and there's nothing else, no other factors, so this one is not factorable at all. Keep in mind, this does not mean there's no solution, it just means it's not factorable. And 26 is different because 26 we can take out a GCF, which means there is something you can factor out. Problem 28, I notice all of these look like maybe they could take out a 5, so let me check math number 9. Math number 9 between 5, 50, and 120. And all of these have 5s. So I can take out a 5, and I'm left with this. So I do have a GCF. Now, I cannot take the square root of 24, so it's not a perfect square. So I will need to multiply. So 24 and x squared is my product. My sum is negative 10x. So I will put the product into my calculator. 24 divided by x, and I'm searching for the sum. I notice my sum is negative, so I'm going to look up in the negatives. This is a negative 25, negative 14, negative 11. Oh, that's a negative 10. And because because I have an x squared, I don't need the box. My factors are negative 4 and negative 6. Thank you. 29, there are no GCFs here. I don't have anything. 11 and 4 is a 2, 6 is 2 and 3, but 11 is not factorable. So I multiply first times last for my product, so 24x squared. My sum is in the center. I will need the box for this because I don't just have a plain x squared. So I put my product divided by x. I'm searching for a negative 11. Oh, there it is, negative 3x and negative 8x. And then I take out my GCFs. So 6 and negative 8 share a 2 and an x. Negative 3 and 4 do not share anything, so we use a 1 as a placeholder. And it is negative because the 3 is negative. 6x squared and negative 3x share a 3 and an x. Negative 8x and 4 share a negative 4. Do my quick check, and those work. So 2x minus 1 and 3x minus 4 are my factors. Problem 30, they ask which expression is a factor, so basically factor and figure out which one is in my problem. So there is no GCF. This is not a special case, so I use my GPS. Product is negative 6x, sum is x, so I'm looking for, well, I don't need the box because it has an x squared. So 3 minus 2 would multiply to negative 6 and add to 1, and this factor matches answer choice B. 31, you can't really do in your head as well. There is no GCF on this. Product first times last is 36x squared, and my sum is negative 15x. So I look in my calculator and y equals, I put the product. I'm searching for a negative sum, so I'm going to go up to the negatives, and -3 and -12 would add to -15. Take out my GCF, so these share a 6 and an x. These share a -1. And then going horizontally, these share a 3 and an x. These share a -2. Do my quick check to make sure, and those multiply, so 6x minus 1 and 3x minus 2. 6x minus 1 matches answer choice A. And then 32 and 33 are two quick review problems. So to find the equation of a line between 2 points, we go to Stat Edit, and we plug in our points exactly like we see them. So we have 2, 3 up at the top, -2, -3 on the bottom, Stat Calc 4, enter, enter, enter. And my equation is 1.5x. You might also see it as a fraction, so remember 1.5 math enter, enter turns that into a decimal. And these mean the same thing. For the last one, we use don't call me after midnight in order to solve. So I do have something to distribute. So 5 times 3x is 15x. 5 times 2 is 10. I do not have any terms on the same side that I need to combine. So I box my x's, and I do have x's on both sides, so I will need to move x to one side. Remember, anytime you cross that equal sign, you have to change signs. I box x, and I do have something outside of my box to add or subtract. And then I do have something to multiply or divide, so x gives me -2.